World Civ Scholars. Okay, we're getting to the end of the class here. I gave you a little lecture, some reading from Geoffrey of Monmouth on this grand British tradition and how the British think of themselves as sort of somehow freedom bringers to the world, and that they have this grand tradition that goes all the way back to Troy, goes through this first person named Brutus, and then the island of Britain eventually gets named by this Brutus and or after this Brutus, and Geoffrey of Monmouth creates this. And this is, children are raised on this story, and it brings. And so even though we don't know if it's how true it is, there's probably some truth in it, but we don't know how true it is. But we do know that the effect of the story helps create a British identity. Okay, so this is one of the interesting ways that history works. Sometimes it's about how we think of ourselves in terms of our tradition. And so I want to talk about Ethiopia today and Africa in general, but Ethiopia in particular. Okay, and this picks up on a tradition a theme that we've been doing throughout the class. Okay, we talked about Black Athena and this very powerful notion of the modern academic world being racist in terms of anti-Black in Africa, anti-Semitic also, and that rooted in the fact that so much of the university's thinking, our rational structures, our systems, our disciplines, even the goofy stuff we wear and the titles we have, all come from 19th century Germany. And as a 19th century German sort of culture, there's a lot of racism in it, and so there's whole ideas of ways of thinking about the history of civilization that appear in textbooks in your classes, your high schools, everything, which are fundamentally not picking up on African traditions. Now, especially what the Africans, especially what the Ethiopians, teach of themselves. And so what I'm going to talk about today is what the Ethiopians teach of themselves, and the connections, especially the connections to the Bible, connections to Herodotus. Because remember, this book here by Bernal, we talked about it, is if you read the Bible and if you read the Herodotus, you actually see a much grander vision of Africa than if you read, say, the Greeks in general, and then of course especially the Europeans later on. They tend to neglect it. So let's go back to the sources. Let's go back to the Bible, and let's go back to Herodotus and see some background to this. And I've given you a video of a real cool one one of these guys gonna go figure out Ethiopia, and it talks about this Ethiopian scholarly tradition, scribal, scholarly, religious. It all wraps together, just like our whole course has wrapped those things together: scholarship, scribal scholarship, and religion and politics and civilization all get wrapped together. And so Ethiopia has a sort of special story to give to the world. Now, okay, we go back to Herodotus. This is book 2 in Herodotus, where, remember, he's talking about going up the Nile, and the Egyptians who live in the cultivated parts of the country, by their practice of keeping records of the past. Herodotus, 450 years BC, recommends the Egyptians to his readers as scholars. They keep track of things. They keep records, Most of the time he's relying on oral traditions, but in Africa he can work with actually written traditions. They have to be translated to him by the priests of Hephaestus. But hey, now, so the Libyans, and that's Africans. These are these people of Africa. He's primarily talking about this Nile River, which he apparently travels down some. Libyans are the healthiest people in the world, okay? And so, this is what we talked about, this idea that there's a positive character to the Africans of the Nile especially. And remember, back then, the distinctions of black and white are not as clear, because Black Africa seems to have come up much further up north, and you didn't have an Egyptian white Africa that distinctive. But at the end of our course, see, now we're at 1500 or so, we've been talking about Ibn Battuta and the development of the Islam. See, Islam takes over a lot of Africa, a lot of West Asia, a lot of South Asia. But notice this. We talked about Ibn Battuta's travels, and he travels in Black Africa out here. It's these folks, very interesting folks. Mombasa, Mogadishu, talks about meeting them. But notice where Ethiopia is. He does not go there, especially right there. That's this kingdom of Aksum. And that was very solidly Christian and Jewish. And so Islamic civilization, and Battuta's going where the scholars of Islam are welcome. And Islamic civilization does not take hold of Ethiopia. And so then, okay, that's what we're talking about. Is this, and so let's go back in time, you know. And this is a 1st century AD map here, but these are trade routes. This is Ethiopia right here at the base. Here's your Red Sea, here's your Nile, okay? And then you have that Gulf of Aqaba here with Petra, you know, that famous place in, you know, that's in the film 3 of the, with Sean Connery in, the Raiders of the Lost Ark set of films. Okay, that's Petra, okay? And it's a great trading center. But see, Petra comes straight down from the River Jordan and Sea of Galilee. And there's a basic trade route here. And then this takes you out into the Indian Ocean. This is when you read the Psalms and you read stories about sailors and storms and Leviathan and all sorts of stuff. They're not necessarily talking about the Mediterranean. They could be talking about the stories that come up from the Indian Ocean and things like that. But over here you have different African civilizations. And civilizations at this point we mean these sort of smaller entities, but they're primarily oral cultures, okay? One of the things about Ethiopia is it's got this half of a foot, you know, or a whole, you know, 1 foot into scribal culture along with the oral culture. Now, Ethiopia itself is this place that you know, you can get to it by the Red Sea, but we don't think people did much of that in terms of the kingdom of Aksum, because you have this mountain range here. And so this is the more, you know, it's a whole different type of place in Ethiopia. This is the country of Ethiopia today. But what we're talking about is this region right up in here. And this flows down, all of the water here flows down into this Lake Tanaya or Tanya, Lake Tana, and then becomes the Blue Nile. And the Blue Nile goes into the Nile and goes up, okay? So you have a direct connection. This is why Herodotus, this is why the Jews, you know, there's some sort of direct connection with Ethiopia throughout history, which is keeping Ethiopia attached to the grand traditions of what we call Western civilization, okay, and not so much for Islamic civilization. Now here's Herodotus book 2, still talking about, you know, this is Egypt book, okay. He thought, you know, he's doing descriptions. The furthest inhabitants toward the southwest, south and west, is Ethiopia. Okay, and by this he means maybe Sudanese, what was called Nubia, Kush. There's a lot down there, but Ethiopia is the name. It's an ancient name, you know, the Ethiopians. Okay, and down there in Ethiopia to the southwest, okay, which is what we thought. Gold is found in great abundance, huge elephants, ebony, all sorts of trees growing wild. The men too are the tallest in the world, best looking, and the longest lived. See, this is he's taken that Libyan, what he says about the healthiest, but then these guys here, they're super special. So Herodotus does this again in book 3. He's talking about coastal stuff going on here and stuff. But here again, the Ethiopians, who were the objects of this attention, said to be the tallest, best looking people in the world. Their laws and customs are peculiar to themselves. And the strangest is the method, I would say, of choosing their king. the man whom they judged to be the tallest and the strong in proportion to his height. This is this stuff where Herodotus, remember, is working with a lot of oral history. He doesn't get down for eyewitness testimony in Egypt. So we're not sure how this, and he tells us all these sort of how we get kings and stuff, and we're never sure how true these are. But on this basis, we are going to be, what we see here is a connection with the Bible again, because the Bible's very interested in queens that come from this area. Okay, so this is the church in Florence, a Renaissance church in Florence, the baptistry, and this is all done in beautiful stuff. Renaissance. This is the Queen of Sheba meeting Solomon, which is a story there that you get of. We get Egypt attacking. We do some Egypt, Jordan stuff back and forth back in the Old Testament, but here it's Ethiopia, probably Queen of Sheba, and so there's a Queen of Sheba connection with Solomon, which is going to be very important for the Ethiopian. Ethiopians believe very strongly that they go back to this deep connection to King Solomon. Okay, now. One of the things that happens is that the ark disappears from the Bible. The temple is destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. No one's sure what happens. There's the Persian history and stuff, and you sort of stop talking about the ark. So Raiders of the Lost Ark. Where is the ark? Well, we talked about this actually earlier. The ark, the Ethiopians say the ark is in this building. Okay, it is this building in Aksum. And Aksum was this great kingdom. And the video I have, one of the reasons I like it is because this investigator, scholar, guy goes and sits down with one of these great Ethiopian Orthodox religious figures. And he is going to then pass on this tradition and the deep belief that the Ethiopians are the guardians of the ark. Great plan of God, and that the ark actually moved. Now, there's different stories of this. There's all sorts of traditions of this that go back into the Middle Ages and such. But notice they didn't bring it down by boat, because it's, probably also because of that land. So you get it over to Elephantine Island, and here's where there were a lot of Jews here. There's a grand Jewish tradition here, even maybe a temple there, okay, that is in Elephantine. And then later on, you see, this is right after the Persian conquest, and then you come down, or I think this is Nebuchadnezzar's conquest, and then you see 100 years later or so, you take it down into Ethiopia, and eventually put it into this building here, after the... See, that's AD, that's BC. So long time later, you eventually get it into this building. And it's not a tourist trap. And so, that's one of the fun things of going and watching that video. The video is that guy is up there and it's not, there it is. And it's a rugged place in the world, but that is where the Ethiopians believe that they are protecting the ark. Subsequent to their, connection that they developed with King Solomon. Now, in the New Testament, Bible scholars, all of you guys know that after Jesus dies, resurrections, and then the ascension, you have these creation of deacons, and one of the deacons is a guy named Philip, and Philip meets an Ethiopian eunuch. And the Ethiopian eunuch is reading, the New Testament tells us, is reading Isaiah. See, this is a scholar. Ethiopian scholar, scribal scholar tradition, And they've got the Bible. They've got the Old Testament. And an Ethiopian eunuch who's on some sort of diplomatic mission and is returning to Ethiopia is in his cart, reading Isaiah. Philip meets him. And Philip explains that that Isaiah is actually prophecy of Jesus, and then the Ethiopian eunuch is baptized. And this creates a deep Jewish Christian tradition that is in in Ethiopia that continues on till today. And you get the, there's all these references to the Lion of Judah and even into the Rastafarian sort of ideas and stuff. So I leave you with that. Watch the video. And this is the grand tradition that brings a great Ethiopian pride to at least that region of Aksum, which is in that northern part of the mountains of Ethiopia. And Ethiopia is a much troubled country, lots going on with Eritrea, Sudan, all sorts of problems, rough. But the Ethiopians are not they're not part of Islamic civilization. They have their own grand tradition. They're not really part of Western civilization either. They see themselves as having a distinctive duty and a distinctive place in the grand story of Jewish Christian, the story of salvation. So, keep an eye on this as you go through life. Everything in our class is just to keep an eye on this stuff as you go through life. Ethiopia is fascinating. I have never been there. I'm going to go there one of these days, though.